My name is Neil Maiden. I'm Professor of Digital Creativity here at Bayes, and I also lead a venture called CBay, Centre for Creativity Enabled by AI, and you will hear more about that later. So, let's get started. Why are we all here? Or why are more of us here this year than we might have had in previous years? There's really just one theme here. It's generative AI. This exploded into the public consciousness last December and has given us new capabilities that we can use in a wide range of domains. Subsequently, I come from the computer science community, at least in part, and there's been a lot of soul searching, a lot of investigation, and I think now we're at a point where we're seeing what businesses really need are more nuanced hybrid solutions that just don't rely on generative AI because it has strengths and weaknesses, but looking at how we can exploit existing traditional approaches to machine learning, and even going back to symbolic AI, using those more established approaches that codify knowledge about business and so on. So we recognize that trend. And that's what we're trying to bring here together with this event that we call the Creative Edge, which I believe is at least partially generated through an AI interaction, wasn't it? Yes. So it's we can't even claim creativity as a creativity group coming up with a name for our own event, but that is an indication of where the world is today. So the theme is that I will start off by introducing the event. And in particular, we are using this event today to launch a new version 1.0 of something we call Business Sparks. It's a digital product that's at the heart of a wider service that we're offering. It's quite vanilla, even though it's got a rather vivid pink color or theme running through it, because we're putting it out there almost as a probe to get feedback. We think it does something interesting, but it can do a lot more. We're interested as part of an ongoing co-design process to understand where you might want it to go. So part of this is really about opening up a dialogue. And then because I'm going to be quite narrow, we're going to broaden it out. And I have a colleague here from the University of Nijmegen, Nijmegen or Nijmegen? Nijmegen, I'm going to get that right, in the Netherlands, but also University of Aachen in Germany, where I also used to work. And she always sort of broadening out the discussion, looking at how cutting edge research on AI is being used for different forms of business strategy and innovation. And then last but not least, I can say this name, Mark Harbury from the Bayes Business School will be sort of looking at what businesses need around cognitive creativity skills. And so you'll notice there's a theme here that is more about creativity. Our center is called CBay, and the word creativity comes before AI because we're interested in creativity and creative thinking in business and other professional domains more than we are in AI. That sounds wrong, but it's about supporting, it's not just playing with AI, it's about using AI for a purpose, which is to enhance creative thinking in different areas. If time remains and I spy enough energy in the room, we'll have a sort of 5 to 10 minute wrap up with all three speakers here before we can then break for food and drinks and lots of discussion, hopefully outside. So my main theme today is something that we call Business Sparks. I'm also going to talk about a new service called Insights that sits underneath it. So I'm going to try and get through quite a lot here in the 45 minutes that I'm allocated. I'm strangely also being allowed to compare myself. So a lot of my colleagues don't realize the careless mistake that they've made. No one's going to wave me off. But I'm going to try and keep this reasonably tight because I wanted to give at least a reasonably vivid software demonstration. There's a lot of evidence that businesses seek creative thinking in their employees. The World Economic Forum has released survey after survey showing that creative thinking is up there with critical problem solving and analytic thinking in the top 3 skills that businesses need of their employees. What I think is really interesting is in the last year, we are seeing a dramatic increase in the demand for creative thinking compared to other skills. The need for more creative thinking by employees is increasing. This is one of the latest outcomes from the World Economic Forum, looking at the top 10 skills on the rise, and creative thinking is the fastest growing from the point of number 3. And I can't remember the precise, but they talked about a 73% increase in demand over the demand for analytic thinking in the same period for 24 to 27. So clearly there is a need. One of the questions I haven't really got an answer to is whether the emergence of generative AI and the positioning of OpenAI of its tools as a means for creativity and creative thinking is actually feeding that, or there's something wider going on. But businesses need creative thinking in their employees. We have to ask ourselves why. Why do they need that? Is it just because generative AI has appeared and is creating opportunities? I suspect not. We need more creative thinking to deal with the faster, ever-changing business environments in which we're working. More design-led businesses, which is a trend in itself, needs more creative input into the design process. So we need the means to manage different forms of creative thinking. Creativity feeds innovation. You need creative ideas in order to innovate effectively in most contexts. Studies show it improves individual and group learning. It can increase organizational performance. It even increases happiness. That's not a bad thing in the state of the world today, but if you're going to be pragmatic, it can also help, therefore, retain your staff if they're happy at work, engaged in creative thinking. So creativity is something that we need in many, many different ways. So how have we tended to do this? This is from a workshop that we ran many years ago with clients in air traffic control. We would run workshops introducing creative thinking techniques into their design or engineering processes, for example. So we would sort of adopt a manual approach. Increasingly nowadays, you're seeing training courses, how to make people more creative. But I think the big breakthrough over the last few years, this is a journalist working with one of our own tools, called Ject or Inject as was. People are increasingly experimenting with digital technologies that are designed to enhance creative thinking. And clearly the emergence of ChatGPT has taken that to a whole new level. So people are increasingly exploring how to be creative. And we have different ways of delivering this, but that delivery mechanism is shifting. So then the question becomes, and this is one of the questions we've explored in our own centre's work, is what are they being creative about? Or wanting to be more creative about, I should say. One of those is where businesses are seeking to be more creative in their thinking about business, their own business models and strategies. Many businesses, especially smaller ones, encounter barriers in trying to work out what their business model is and what it might be in these rapidly changing environments. And that problem has become more acute as the digital revolution challenges those business models and requires more regular rethinks. Things are just changing faster, so we actually need to be more creative more regularly around how we establish our value propositions. How do we create value and how do we capture it? How do we go about that? And my colleague here, Charles Barton-Fuller from Bayes, we've talked a lot about this, about there is an absence of enough creative thinking around how you establish the business models and strategies. Now, of course, there are things out there. I'm not going to deny that we're in a sort of an open space here, a white page in which to explore. There are many well-established titles and books. Of course, you can go to lots of websites. And the work that Charles has led around something called the Business Model Zoo is an interactive tool, web tool that you can go in to explore different business models according to the characteristics of your business. But we thought we can go beyond that and introduce AI more into supporting creative thinking about discovering and then exploiting that business model. And of course, the obvious question in all of this is, what about the new AI tsunami that's emerged through GPT and then all of these other forms of large language models? Where do they fit in all of this? And one question that sort of comes up a lot, and I'm encountering when I sit on panels and so on, do we look at AI as a means of primarily improving the productivity and efficiency of the business? Is it our sort of 21st century version of Henry Ford's faster horses within the workplace? Or do we really need to think more radically about, with the emergence of these technologies, how they're going to change the nature of everyday work across businesses, but in particular, in our case, around business models and strategies? I think the other interesting question around large language models is, what happens to all the stuff that exists already? Now, I know what you'll say. The companies building these models are harvesting information from books and papers and so on, but they haven't got access to everything. And it's more than just building extremely sophisticated large language models. There's a lot of codified knowledge, documented and codified knowledge in business model papers, business strategy papers, textbooks, and so on. And if we take the creativity side, creativity and creative thinking has been the subject for academic research for 60, 70 years at least. There's a huge amount of knowledge about how to, when to, which is codified in ways that are not necessarily accessible in forms that we would like through large language models. So there's an interesting question about, this generative AI focus. What does it mean for all the knowledge that's out there at the moment, which we want in forms that we've got? And the limitations of GPT and other large language models, I think, are well documented. You don't have that explicit representation of knowledge. It's very hard when you have a large language model to go in and say, is this fact here that I want to change, or is this rule? And that's quite a big deal for a lot of businesses that we're working with. That in turn limits the transparency of these models. Quality control over public models is difficult, according to GPT-4. Until recently, I had an MSc that I'd never earned. That must have been the easiest public degree I've ever got, and it attributed it to the wrong university. So there's all these issues around trust, risks of service outage that happened with GPT the other week. And in some senses, the large language model solutions, if you care about the wider sustainability of the planet, often they're sledgehammers to crack a nut, and they are sort of consuming a lot of power in their day-to-day operation. So there are these limitations of large language models. What is more, there are basic theories out there which tell us what people do need to be creative every day. And Teresa Amabile's work, the three-component model, suggests that in order for people to be creative regularly in work and other situations, they need three things. They need to be motivated. They want to have to do it, largely intrinsic, but also to some degree extrinsic. They need to have some knowledge of the problem. They need to have that domain expertise. And they need to have creative thinking skills. And in our experience, most people in business, if you're running a business, you have that motivation, you care, you want to make it different. You tend to know a lot about the business you're in. You know about the problems, the challenges, the products you're offering, and so on. But we are not educating and teaching people in the creative thinking skills that they need. And I'm arguing that GPT is not enough to supplement that. You need more. So it's about trying to position technologies so that they support and introduce that creative thinking knowledge without undermining the expertise that the business person might have and their motivation to develop business strategies. Solutions need to support creative thinking rather than automate it. And one of the things I will sort of try and highlight when I'm doing the demonstration in a few minutes is that we could automate more, but we're trying to find the right balance between automation and augmentation. It's a moving target as our experiences with these technologies evolve. So what I'm going to do now is, first of all, have a quick sip of water, because I didn't have one before I started, and talk about something that we've been developing that we call Business Sparks. Now, if you were here last year, you realize we call everything something Sparks. We have Sports Sparks, Design Sparks, Bright Sparks. It's become a theme, Star Sparks. So this is Business Sparks. It's also underpinned by something that we're developing called Insights that we can talk about in a while. So we've designed Business Sparks primarily for leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises. They may be managers, they may be directors, they may have responsibility for particular functions in the business, and also for consultants who might be working on behalf of those businesses when those businesses are clients. And what we tried to do with our approach, which is mimicked in these other Star Sparks products, is to develop forms of machine reasoning with codified knowledge about business models and strategies and codified knowledge about how to be creative. We're drawing on all of that codified expertise about business models, about creative thinking techniques and strategies in order to deliver what we call intentional creativity, when we give you a prompt, we're trying to direct your creativity. We're not throwing it out there as some sort of almost pseudo-random prompt. It's deliberately trying to direct your creativity towards spaces of possibilities where you might find ideas. And we're trying to deliver this in a way that is simple to adopt. But of course, we're not ignoring large language models. So we have some intersection with, at the moment, GPT, but we are thinking about moving to other large language model platforms with that. And I would argue, often when you're working with the large language models, the delivery of novel and useful content, i.e. creative ideas, tends to be a little bit more accidental because it's not built into the algorithms. Our algorithms are designed to push and provoke creative thinking on purpose. Is that always the same case with the design of the algorithms, or I can't really call it algorithms, but the models? There tends to be also a focus on more concrete ideas that come out from large language models. Of course, you can shape the prompts, but it tends to be about being more concrete solutions. It's less about augmentation. It's more about here are solutions. And I would argue in some cases they're harder to adopt in different contexts. So we're focusing on the larger bubble, recognizing there is some intersection, and we've started to integrate this year large language models into our technologies. So what I'm going to present now is Business Sparks. As I said at the beginning, it's very much a beta tool. It's version 1.0. It's kind of vanilla. We're putting it out there with some core functionality we think is useful. It's not perfect. We're still debugging, we're still refining, but more importantly for the audience today, we're putting it out there as a platform for you to give us your thoughts about. Could you use it in a certain way if it did this or that? Could we take on board some integration with what you do? Could you use some of the services that we expose via APIs in your own platform? So I'll follow up on this in a short while. A little bit more about us. So we are the Bayes Business School, formerly CAS, and unsurprisingly, we have a lot of knowledge about business models, and business strategy. And that is something that we can bring to the table. What we have been doing is codifying this knowledge, or at least some of it to start with, and codifying it in a form that the machine, the tool, can reason about when trying to provoke creative thinking. We're Triple Crown accredited. In the last REF, the Research Excellence Framework, the league tables that the government ordains that we shall partake in, we were 5th in the UK, which is not bad for a school of our size. And what we're doing is we're combining that with the thing that I talked about at the beginning, CBay, the Centre for Creativity Enabled by AI. We are funded by Research England. We were funded back in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. So the first 18 months, we physically hardly saw each other. Running through to next year, at least at the moment, it's a large budget, and our focus is on impact. We're trying to take research and deliver it as impact into business. And we've been developing products in a whole range of areas to different degrees of evolution. Journalism, sports coaching, that was what the theme of last year's was. Service and product design, manufacturing, social care for older people with dementia. These are all domains that can benefit from more directed creative thinking by the professional participants who engage in them. And we have a lovely team. I don't know why I put the females on the right and the males on the left. I think it was the speed at which the images came. I apologize, Sam, okay? That was an accident that I didn't think through until I looked at it just now. So pictures of our team, and I put the pictures up there, so if you find a bug, you can figure out who they are and pick it up. So we're bringing together this expertise of creativity with this knowledge and expertise in business models and business strategies. And just to sort of ram home our approach, we're adopting a hybrid technology approach. So we're taking existing creativity knowledge through techniques, strategies, context in which you might use different creative thinking techniques, although it's not that transparent in the first version. Linking them with features of effective co-creative AI tools that have been researched and developed, bringing in the codified knowledge of business models and strategies, throwing this all together into the hybrid engine that combines symbolic AI, case-based reasoning, and heuristic reasoning with machine learning and now Gen AI. And I think that's where the future of these technologies is going to go. We've got a large number of effective technologies And I think the next level of generation is going to be how we combine these together to align effectively with existing and new business use cases. This then gives us the on-demand guidance to explore spaces of possibilities for my new business model and strategies. Something that I won't talk a lot about today is a theme of creative self-belief. For people to be creative, they have to have a degree of belief about their own capabilities. The number of people I've sat with and said, I've had to come to this workshop that you're facilitating, but I'm not creative. There's something about the word creativity that discourages people from participating in it. We are developing a wider service with workshops and training to demonstrate how you can be creative in this context. So a business challenge comes in, we bring all that knowledge together, we reason about it in different ways, we generate spaces of possibilities, and we throw out possibilities around creative strategies and models in response to that business challenge. That's the overarching approach. I'm not going to get more technical than this today. The technical team are largely sat in that row over there. Put your hands up, please. No, you're not going to put your hands up. Okay, right, yes. They're nervous because we haven't really exposed this tool like this before. So I'm not going to push too hard on that one. And it's all about delivering human-centered AI. It's really about not putting the person in the loop. It's about putting the machine in the loop around the human work of creative thinking in different contexts. I've tried to draw on interesting principles and guidelines here, and one comes from Ben Schneiderman, who's one of the founding figures of human-centered, or HCI, human-computer interaction, sorry. And he believes that we really can deliver technologies that both maximize automation and maximize user control. We tend to think of the two as on a spectrum, there's tension, but they don't need to be. You can automate and give users control at the same time. So, our approach has been largely co-designing with SME managers and consultants. Where we've got to now is really version 1.0. That co-design is still ongoing. And we've been working on this for about a year. And where we're at now looks very different from where we started. So I now have a demo. It's videoed, because when you're developing creativity tools, you're never quite sure what's going to come up. So I have videoed this, trust me, otherwise I'll just stand here like a dribbling idiot trying to work out what's going on in front of me. And rather like a performer, I've got a set list here in front of me of what to look for in the demo as I go through, since this is a new tool and I haven't quite learned it all yet. So it's a web application, it's responsive. You can adjust it to run on a tablet, desktop, or your smartphone. The interface is now quite simple. We used to have a more complicated starting point, but feedback from the business people and the consultants suggested keep it tight. So here we go. It's going to be about 10, 15 minutes of this. So first of all, you'll notice there's an opportunity to sign up or log in if you've already got an account, but you don't need to do that to use the tool. And you can either sort of type in your text or upload files. We'll come back to the uploading file later. So let's just think about typing a new challenge. I can enter it myself. But what I'm going to do here is use one of the examples that we got embedded in the tool, which is a business challenge related to local supply chains in supermarkets. It's actually derived from a PwC case study that's available publicly online, and I'll show you more of that later on. So it's experiencing problems with its supply chain, suppliers often arrive late, negative impacts, etc. Just type that in, press continue, and immediately the tool is now undertaking different forms of reasoning to generate what we call sparks. So these are sparks, they're worded as questions because they're not answers, they're opening up spaces of possibilities for you. And this is essentially generated using codified knowledge that comes from the expertise we have within Bays. You've got control over the direction by focusing on different types of spaces of possibilities. I can focus on sparks related to customs and sales, suppliers and processes, finances and acquisition. We can refine that. We've got the ability to drill down on things that are much more profound, but we need to know whether there's a need to do that. And then, of course, let's focus on suppliers and processes, because that was the essence of the challenge that we put in for the moment. We tend to present 5 sparks at a time. We find that's an effective way of giving focus, but allowing people to browse. And we can work through these. And if there's ones that I like, I can bookmark them. And we'll come back to the bookmarking later. So it's really easy. Bookmark interesting themes to explore later, and then just refresh. And there may be one spark that's interesting to me on there. There may be 2. or there may be 5. But you're just sort of browsing ideas. Now, the idea here is the tool is not trying to give you answers. It's just suggesting, look at this angle, look at that angle based on the heuristic reasoning that's incorporating the codified business knowledge that we have. So let's imagine we browse a few of these. What we can then do is you'll also notice that next to our bookmarked sparks is a little robot head that we had a lot of discussion about as an icon. Now, if I click on that, it will then sort of start to explore possible solutions or possible answers to those ideas. So it's sort of focus on your practices for customers, how might you diversify your supply sources, and it's generating possible ideas based on those. And again, you can bookmark these as possible ideas to take forward later on, either into an action plan or some other form of output. So it's designed to be, almost think of it as kind of a smart Google. You're kind of typing in a business challenge, going through quickly exploring sparks and ideas. Browse, search, select, and so on. At the moment, we've restricted it to 2 ideas at a time, but this is really partly due to response times of GPT at times of stress. But all of this is possible, and we've actually, in one of our other tools now, got a means by which we can speed up the response time to this quite considerably, and we will roll that out into the next version of Business Sparks. There's the danger of depending on external tools. So you get the idea. The tool is opening up new spaces of possibilities for a business model or strategy that you're not thought of, and then you're able to bookmark ideas to take forward later. And again, all of this can be done through this sort of refreshing, exploring, bookmarking, refreshing, exploring, bookmarking. You'll also notice next to the sparks that we've got another tab called resources, and we've populated that with some basic content at the moment to demonstrate how this can work. The 2 types of resources we've got up there at the moment are really in response to what business people have said they want. The first is in regard to academic papers. So in the background, our engine is retrieving academic papers that semantically match to the challenge that you've requested. So it's clearly around supply chains. There's something going on around perishable products over here on the right. So I think I'll select this one. And of course, we're not. And you'll notice also the themes that we're putting out. So we're also doing some processing of the content that's exposed, and we can do more with that. I'll talk about that later. You can then be taken straight away to the paper at source. I just hadn't logged into Semantic Scholar to show that. And you can browse down and show other ones here. So quickly, we can sort of bring various functions that people undertake into one place and enable the bookmarking of these as part of your exploration of the challenge. We've also worked with Charles again. Charles's business model zoo has hundreds of case studies in it that they've developed, and we're also able to retrieve those and match them to the challenge. So there may be something useful in this. Now, at the moment, we present the case study as is, but of course, we can also do reasoning with the content to start to explicitly link that content to your challenge. Should that be something that people want? Our potential to implement things is quite considerable, and we're really looking for suggestions and feedbacks from business people about how this should be taken. So far I've showed you everything that you can do without having to actually log in. There's no sort of incumbency in having to create an account or anything else like that. It's really just sort of get started. Now, I'm not going to show you the logging in part and some of the extra advantages that can come with that. So you can sign up very quickly. I've obviously already got an account, so there you go. You've got an idea of the length of my password. I'm now logged in. You'll notice some other features will appear in a minute. Let's go back to our challenge again. Again, I can sort of explore the sparks and so on and so on. I can refresh, but I can also continue. And at this point, we're going to look at, you can see I can review the bookmarks that I've had, and I've started again, so I haven't saved anything. But more interestingly, we have new features here now about, would you like to broaden your challenge? And this was an interesting outcome that came from discussing, certainly with consultants. Often when they take a challenge, they want to look at it from different perspectives. In creative thinking terms, it's called transformational creative thinking, or in the popular parlance, thinking out of the box. Let's look at this from a different perspective. Is this problem really a supply chain problem? So the tool is combining different forms of machine learning and generative AI and natural language processing based on what you put in to come up with different possible framings of the challenge. And it's got the potential to generate many, many different hundreds of these framings at different levels of granularity. So it might suggest it's maybe more about your supplier-buyer relationships. It might be almost about sort of perhaps it's an outsourcing, offshoring problem. I know it's a local supermarket, but there could be something interesting around thinking about the outsourcing or the offshoring of this. And of course, you might be interested in saying, okay, let's reframe my challenge from that perspective. What the tool will then do is rewrite your challenge from that perspective as a means to go again. So you can frame, pivot, explore, frame, pivot, explore. Now, of course, we give the user the ability to change that. They might not actually like what's generated, so you can then sort of go in and edit the text. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that editing, but I can certainly remove that first bit of text. Let's just go with the revised definition because I want to work with it. You'll notice on the left, you can always go back to your original challenge. So you never lose what you wrote. You can always go back to where you started with your challenge. And we look now, you'll start to get different sparks. Because there's different content in the challenge, you'll start to get different sparks. So quite quickly, you can explore different perspectives on that challenge using the reframed content that's been generated by the machine that, of course, you always have user control over. You can edit it. And we can go round that cycle again. So reframing, we think, is something that's extremely important to do early on, to make sure you've got all of the aspects of the problem, really getting the challenge and the problem right. And I'll just sort of run through that. And again, you can sort of, as I say, you're generating different kinds of ideas now based on the different reframings. Let's move on. So up until now, we haven't said very much about the business that has the challenge. Now, at the moment, we've added some basic functionality that enables you to say something interesting about the business. We have ideas that we'd like to test with people about how it can go forward. So we can indicate the sector it's in. So we're using standard taxonomies. We can indicate the company's size. We can indicate whether it's a business firm. And we can also say something interesting about the challenge here. We can indicate how broad or narrow the challenge is. Is this a very sort of narrow tactical challenge within a project, or is it something that's much broader to the whole business? So let's imagine, I think it's a strategic organization challenge. That changes the framing. Suddenly we look at the challenge from a much broader perspective, and it suggests different framings. If I then sort of narrow it, which I think is what I do next, so I can look at it from a CSR perspective and then generate ideas around that. But of course, if I then narrow it and say, perhaps this is actually more of an operational project challenge, we'll start to get slightly different framings and sparks as a result. So again, we're sort of giving you the ability to look big and look narrow, ideally in sort of quick, almost playful terms, that trying to get close to frictionless creative thinking through the tool. You can see that I've been bookmarking things as we can go. I can go back to my saved challenges and go back to this challenge around the supermarket. I can delete it, I can edit it. And then you'll see down here in the bookmark section, I can store all the bookmarks, the ideas, the resources, the reframing, everything that's marked as I go through is simply there for me to explore. And then at some point in a second, you can also ask to copy it out. Now, at the moment, we don't produce action plans, business plans. That's something we want to talk to you about. But I can certainly, at this moment, copy that content into a clipboard as a default to enable you to take the content out of the tool. And in this case, you get a formatted. I just put it into a spreadsheet, and you can see the outputs there. We're not proud of that, but it's a placeholder for asking exactly what you want out of the tool. We can do so much more. The question is, what do businesses want? Now, the last thing is, obviously, we talked about small challenges. Let's look at the original inspiring PricewaterhouseCoopers case study, this is publicly available. It actually comes from a 13-page PDF document. So I told you we can upload PDFs. So this is what happens if I upload more or less than most of that document. I click on the file upload. I just drag, I think I drag it in here, should do, drag the file in, there you go. We're now doing processing, we're making sense of that file, the content in that file. We're processing and we're manipulating it. What we will do in a minute is generate a relatively simple version of it, but we'll also use that content again to generate sparks. So you can upload quite large documents, have them manipulated in 5-10 seconds, and then away you go. Let's start ideating about the content of that document. So again, back into the sparks. There's talk about carbon emissions. There's talk about sort of how the supermarket operates in Hong Kong. It's pulling out these themes much more quickly. We're trying to remove the barriers to creative thinking rather than sit down and read this thing, just straight through. And I think this is one of the real advantages here, how you can manipulate a lot of this content. So you get the idea. I'm not going to take time. You go around again. So what we've identified from a lot of feedback so far is, a great pink business sparks pipeline, business contextualization. You can upload the URL of the business, and we will use that as part of the contextualization of the challenge if that website contains useful information. Some business owners have said they would like to upload more formatted information about the market, the challenge. So we give you a form that you can upload as a PDF that will give you that kind of context. More diverse creative thinking techniques. It's quite limited at the moment in that regard. More targeted business resources and also content extraction from the case studies. It's not just the case studies as text, but making sense of them in different contexts. We've developed a local large language model in GPT based on hundreds of our own business strategy and model publications. It gives some interesting results, but on its own doesn't make sense. If we integrate it into this technology, it can. We can do that with your content. And also, the not very proud of Excel spreadsheet output, we can auto-generate action plans that could include SWOT analyses, risk analyses, and are much richer. I think it's one of the questions we're really keen to find out what the answers are. You can use the tool as is, but we can also expose the various services for integration into your tools. The APIs for generating those sparks, for generating possibilities from those sparks, as well as the sparks itself, for generating the different reframings, for rewriting the challenges and so on. So if you don't like the whole tool, but you think there's something neat in it, talk to us because we will expose those APIs and license them to you. There are many ways to implement this. And coming back to that whole theme of creative self-belief, basically sticking a tool like this in front of somebody isn't going to necessarily make them as creative as they could be. So we're offering this as a service. We're offering workshops and training. I think there's real scope up after this to sort of run half-day workshops to enable businesses to come in and talk about their business models and strategies within a sort of private environment and use our techniques and tools. Clearly, we've got the website, which links to the tool. You would have seen outside there are various packs of cards that sort of condense some of the codified knowledge into play cards, and also something we call creativity triggers, which are really simplifications of the creative guidance in booklets. It looks deceptively simple, but you put them into a workshop format, these can really deliver for people. Questions about how to gain better market access, family businesses running, acquisitions, suppliers, circular economies. All of these facilitated alongside the tool have shown to have an effect, a positive effect in creative thinking in different sectors in which we've employed this. Finally, we scaled up from a textual description of a challenge, one paragraph, to one PDF. Why stop there? And that's where our supporting service called Insights comes in. Many organizations have a lot of write-only documents, as I call them as a computer scientist. They tend to get written, they tend to get filed, they're not exploited as much as they should. Market reports, competitor analysis, patents, and so on. So can we run this kind of approach across large internal information assets? Imagine we can upload lots of files and it will generate lots of interesting business opportunities based on the creative insights from algorithms exploring the content across those assets as a whole. So that's what we've done. You can upload a set of information documents. We can identify interesting themes in those documents, and we can generate candidate business opportunities from them. So far, well, people are going, well, that's not so interesting because that's kind of machine learning applications, topic modeling perhaps. But what we've done is try to push it one level further. What about those ideas that are not documented at all in your material, but exist in sort of semantic spaces in and around them, between them, the gaps? Creativity is often about looking for something that isn't there yet. It's the antithesis of search, it's unsearch. These are these multicolored spots. They may be partially overlapping or in between different pairs or triplets of documents. We've designed algorithms that will go and find those in large numbers potentially, and present them back to you as candidate business opportunities that we're unpacking as these simple business opportunity proposals that get thrown out in a website, which suggest the customer segment need, businesses, resources and capabilities, and even a candidate business model or two. And this will come out from a sort of single analysis of a large set of information assets. We're testing this this is quite new, so we're testing this for 2 use cases at the moment. We're working with Oxentia, funded by Innovate UK, who have a lot of client business documents that we're applying this to. And we're also working with a large German white goods manufacturer that I can't tell you who it is, who makes stuff that lives in your kitchen. And we're looking at how we can support their product innovation by applying this to patents and so on. So talk to us about that. Last but not least is Design Sparks, which is a tool that's already out there. Looks a bit like this and kind of does the same thing, but for service design. So as you drill down into those sparks and those ideas, you might identify there's an interesting business idea that needs to be implemented as a service. We can then think in different ways using different creative thinking techniques using Design Sparks. At the moment, the two tools are not connected, but there's scope for us again to do that if people can see themselves moving from business models, business strategies through to possible ideas about how they might be implemented as a service or product. Gosh, I'm actually bringing this train into the station on time. Sometimes I even surprise myself since I didn't properly rehearse this. So I've done a very quick run through of what I wanted to do. We're using new forms and existing forms of AI, I think, in new ways to try and stimulate more creative thinking for business about SME business models and strategies. We see it as a tool that can be used by both people working in the SMEs as well as consultants and consultancies working on their behalf. We think there may be slightly different versions for each. Again, we can explore and entertain that. One of our unique selling points is the explicit codification of business and creativity knowledge that we've only really started to explore through Business Sparks, and it's there. We're keen for you to try it out. It's now on the website, right? It's now on the website. Good. Share it with colleagues. It's freely available for now. And ask us how it might work with your business. So I'm going to pause there. I think I could allow one question from the audience, but I'm going to move on to. You're happy with that, Vera, are you? So I will stop, but I will allow that. There's a hand at the back.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Laura. I'm a strategy consultant and I really love this. I have a question. Can we generate different business model with different revenue models, with different ways of strategies? Because that's what I enjoy playing with in my spare time.
Not explicitly at the moment. We haven't got a strong representation of business models and business model taxonomies or types at the moment, but that's to go in soon. So we have actually documented a large number of business types that links through to the business model types that my colleague Charles has developed as part of the business model zoo. But that, I think, is the next phase, and we'll be happy to talk to you about how that might work, because these are the kinds of specific use cases we now want to understand and try and support with businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you.